Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to cut through all the tech doom-mongering and the endless hype to look at what the empirical data actually says about massive technological shifts. We're currently living through one of the fastest technology rollouts in human history with generative AI. And, because it's moving so incredibly fast, it's super easy to get lost in the noise, the conflicting headlines, and just the everyday panic. So today, we're relying on some incredible research, primarily a comprehensive review from the International Center for Law and Economics, to really ground our understanding of this shift in actual hard numbers.
So here is our roadmap for today. 1. Navigating the messy middle. 2. The productivity J-curve. 3. Reallocation, not broad replacement. 4. The jagged technological frontier. 5. Startups and open source. And finally, 6. Case for strategic forbearance. We're going to break this whole complex transition down, moving from the macro-level confusion we see in the broader economy right down to the micro-level reality of what's actually happening inside individual firms today.
Section 1. Navigating the messy middle, the macro confusion. You see, massive economic transitions often feel incredibly disruptive and, honestly, kind of chaotic, long before aggregate data catches up to reality.
I absolutely love this quote from a Bloomberg NEF report on the energy sector. It says, "The global economy has reached the messy middle of the energy transition, where renewable energy and electric vehicles are prevalent enough to affect the demand for fossil fuels without entirely displacing them." Now, this concept of a messy middle perfectly mirrors the AI transition we are experiencing right now. We're in that awkward, extended in-between phase. The old ways of doing business are being seriously challenged, but the new, highly efficient ways haven't quite taken over the whole shebang just yet.
Now, what's really interesting here is this massive paradox we're facing. By late 2024, nearly 40% of US adults reported using AI tools. I mean, we are talking about an adoption rate faster than the early days of personal computers or the internet. It is truly a staggering cultural and technological saturation point. Yet, when we zoom out and look at the macroeconomy, the aggregate output and job data, it's mostly flat. There are no massive immediate GDP spikes, and thankfully, no economy-wide mass unemployment. So you got to ask yourself, if everyone is suddenly using this incredibly powerful new technology, why isn't it showing up in the big national economic numbers?
To answer that, let's look at Section 2, the productivity J-curve, why the data lags. Let's explore exactly why this statistical lag is happening across the broader economy.
This brings us to a brilliant concept from economists Eric Brynjolfsson, Daniel Rock, and Chad Cyberson called the productivity J-curve. When a general-purpose technology like AI arrives, it doesn't instantly make everything faster. Actually, measured productivity can temporarily stagnate. Why? Well, because the economy is currently in an initial, highly costly investment phase. Firms are spending heavily on intangibles. We're talking new software licenses, completely redesigning their internal business processes, and upskilling their workforce. This isn't a failure phase. It's absolutely crucial. It's a necessary building phase.
Let's walk through the friction involved here. Step 1 is just buying the technology. That's the easy part. But to actually get value out of it, firms have to move to Step 2, which requires completely redesigning their organizational workflows. You can't just plug AI into a 1990s business model and expect a miracle, right? Then comes Step 3, training the workers to use these new systems effectively. All of this costs immense amounts of time and money without producing immediate results. It's only after these foundational steps are completed that we finally reach Step 4, where those massive efficiency gains actually show up in measurable macro output. Right now, as an economy, we are just slogging through the heavy lifting of Steps 2 and 3.
Section 3. Reallocation, not broad replacement. Who is feeling the squeeze? So if the macro data is flat, let's pivot down to the firm level to see what's actually happening on the ground. When we dive into the data from the International Center for Law and Economics, a pretty striking reality emerges. While we aren't seeing mass aggregate layoffs across the entire economy, the pain is highly concentrated. In highly AI-exposed roles, employment for entry-level workers, specifically those ages 22 to 25, dropped by roughly 16% relative to the trend. Meanwhile, senior-level employment in those exact same fields remained completely stable. Essentially, AI is successfully automating the discrete routine tasks, things like writing basic first drafts or sorting preliminary data, that have traditionally served as the training ground for junior employees.
So, the crucial point here is that AI fundamentally shifts the balance of skills in the workplace through a phenomenon called skill compression. Multiple controlled experiments show that AI acts as an incredible equalizer. It disproportionately boosts the output and quality of lower-performing or less experienced workers, dramatically narrowing the performance gap. Conversely, top performers and experienced professionals aren't being replaced. They're actually using AI outputs to target their review efforts. A senior editor, for example, isn't writing from scratch anymore. They're applying their deep, years-earned judgment to verify, refine, and elevate what the AI produces.
But of course, relying on AI requires knowing its limits. Section 4. The jagged technological frontier. Knowing AI's boundaries.
There's this fascinating concept from a Boston Consulting Group experiment regarding the realities of micro-level AI deployment, and they call it the jagged technological frontier. Think of AI capabilities not as a smooth, predictable wall, but as a jagged, highly uneven coastline. Inside the boundary, AI might drastically improve your productivity on a highly complex, multi-layered task. But just an inch outside that boundary, on a task that seems entirely similar or even simpler to a human, the AI might confidently produce hidden, catastrophic errors. Because it's so uneven, human workers have to know exactly when to trust the tool and when to vigorously verify its output.
When humans navigate that frontier successfully, the empirical time savings derived from field experiments are staggering. To put this into perspective, professional writers saw a 40% reduction in task time. Software developers coded nearly 56% faster. Accountants saved a remarkable 7.5 days on their monthly book closing. But in every single case, there is a massive risk factor: over-reliance or boundary failures. The massive efficiency gains absolutely require human oversight to prevent the AI from hallucinating a costly error. The human is still the ultimate backstop.
And speaking of unexpected things popping up in our data, 34. I'm throwing this in as a quick, cheeky Easter egg. While reviewing our source material, an excerpt from an NBR paper on banking crises in historical perspective provided exactly one piece of context: the number 34. That's it. It's just a great reminder that whether we're talking about AI hallucinations or macroeconomic data, bizarre statistical anomalies pop up absolutely everywhere, and human context is always required to make sense of them.
Section 5. Startups and Open Source. The Rise of the AI Co-Founder. Moving back to the impact on the ground, let's look at how this technology is fundamentally democratizing entrepreneurship.
And this brilliantly illustrates a key point. If you think AI is solely the domain of massive closed tech monopolies, the data says otherwise. A massive 89% of organizations using AI are incorporating open source components into their workflows. Open source is drastically lowering deployment costs and driving widespread access. It means that the fundamental building blocks of this revolution aren't locked behind a handful of corporate gates, allowing small, scrappy firms to compete on a level playing field with industry giants.
Because of this wide accessibility, AI is essentially acting as a co-founder for startups. It substitutes for managerial, technical, and operational tasks that used to require a much larger initial headcount and heavy funding. By lowering the minimum viable team size, resource-constrained first-time founders can enter the market faster. This completely shifts the entire competitive landscape. Instead of large incumbents relying on static market share and deep pockets, they are now forced to compete dynamically on rapid innovation against small, incredibly agile teams powered by AI. It's a real game changer.
Finally, let's talk about the rules of the game. Section 6. Case for strategic forbearance. Policy in the messy middle. We'll neutrally look at the economic trade-offs of regulating during such a rapid technological shift.
The International Center for Law and Economics has evaluated the policy landscape and advocates for a posture of strategic forbearance. So rather than creating fragmented, highly specific new rules for a technology that is radically changing month to month, they recommend relying on established technology-neutral laws. The underlying logic here is pretty straightforward. The offense matters more than the tool used to commit it. If an AI commits fraud, we use our robust existing fraud laws. If an algorithmic tool discriminates, we use our existing civil rights laws.
The ICLEI's neutral policy recommendations emphasize that premature, prescriptive mandates can inadvertently stifle the very innovation that helps those smaller startups we just talked about. They warn that fragmented state-by-state laws create massive compliance burdens that only giant monopolies can actually afford to navigate, freezing out the little guys. Instead, they suggest utilizing waivers and pilot programs to carefully learn about actual risks on the ground, while aggressively investing in complements like STEM education and digital infrastructure to support broad, pro-competitive deployment.
Let's move to our final thought and see how this all builds together. The micro-level data proves the productivity potential is absolutely real, but getting out of the messy middle requires serious adaptation. Will our institutions, our training programs, and our regulatory frameworks evolve quickly enough for these massive productivity gains to broadly and sustainably materialize? The technology is largely ready and rapidly improving. The question now is, are we? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped clear up the macroeconomic picture of AI. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.